I just watched that movie 28 years later, and here's the thing. The biggest problem isn't the Left 4 Dead type zombies. It is the people who can turn their stupidity on and off selectively. Look, if you've been alive for nearly 30 years in a world crawling with infected, you would not get to switch your brain off whenever the plot needs it. I know I sound like the critical drinker here. Nah, it'll be fine. But look, one mistake means you don't get to make another, especially in a world like this. And yet, throughout this darn movie, characters kept turning stupidity on and off like a light switch, and that's kind of what broke the story for me. So today, I'm going to go over 8 key light switch moments where characters turn on and off their stupidity, and then I'm going to give you an example of another movie and how they did it better in each of these 8 examples. Warning here, this contains spoilers for 28 years later. Duh. So, the setup here in 28 years later is this. It's almost been 3 decades since the rage virus first tore through Britain. There's a few people who've managed to survive. They've been hardened by it. Most of the mainland of Britain is a wasteland. It's still in quarantine from Europe. But there is one isolated island community that's kept going. A father and his son go across a causeway that's only available at low tide for a rite of passage hunt. Meanwhile, this boy's mother is dying of an unspecified illness. When the boy finds out that a doctor might be living nearby, he takes the sick mother away from their island refuge to find him. Now, along the way, they run into a Swedish sailor who is stranded on the island. They help an infected pregnant woman give birth, and eventually they find a doctor who spent his time building a monument to the dead, a bone monument. Now, you know, the island home that is featured in the movie is a real place. You can visit it, and if you want to do that, you'll save a lot of money on your cell plan with Sally. If you're planning a trip to England to visit the island or a trip anywhere, you need to use Sally. It's an eSIM or digital virtual SIM card that replaces physical SIM cards in most devices. Sally pre-negotiates data rates with cell carriers around the world, so you only pay one data rate when you travel. Whenever I travel overseas, Verizon charges $12 a day for international roaming. With Sally, I pay one rate, lasts the whole trip. I used it in Israel, I paid $8 for a week of data. I was in Canada, I paid $5 for a week of data. There's no reason not to use Sally unless you just like wasting money. You download the Sally app before you go. You sign up, you pick your plan. If you have a regional plan because you want to visit multiple countries, there's no need to switch plans. It is really convenient. Verizon's Travel Pass is $12 a day. Why wouldn't you use this? It literally pays for itself. Get an exclusive 15% discount on Sally eSIM data plans. Download the Sally app, use code Macbeth at checkout, scan the code on screen right now to get started today. Okay, let's get started. Number 1, the father fails to notice a slow infected. During this original rite of passage hunt, the father finds what he calls a slow-low, an infected who is slow and crawls around the ground. And he talks his son through how to kill it. But during this time, he fails to notice a second slow-low zombie that's either like behind him or kind of to the right of him. And I know what they're doing here. They're trying to set up tension, but the problem is that there's no way the father would have lasted 28 years in this world if he wasn't constantly checking his surroundings. Contrast that with The Revenant, which is a movie about a fur hunter in early America who is mauled by a bear and left for dead. Like in one scene, Leonardo DiCaprio seals his throat up with gunpowder. He uses a dead horse for warmth. He doesn't have a stupid moment in The Revenant because he's an experienced outdoorsman, and the moment he did have a stupid moment, he'd be dead. And I know why they included this scene with the father and the son, and I think they did it to establish how 28 years later there's different types of infected, just kind of like Left 4 Dead. But maybe this could have been improved by striking the slow-low and then suddenly having a fast zombie come out of nowhere. Not try to build this kind of fake tension in a manufactured scene when this father would have been dead if he had ever ignored a zombie before. They would have established that the stakes were very real if they did this. And there's different types of infected working together. Like the fast ones might use the slow ones as bait, right? Number 2, cutlery versus frisbee. Now, the father and the son find a house that's been picked over, but it still has some stuff. The boy finds some silverware. The father tells him, oh, we have plenty of that. But then he finds a frisbee and he takes it. Now, if this old silverware is 100% silver or even silver plated, it might not have much use for tools or weapons, but silver is antimicrobial and that still has some use. And if you are living in an era where there's essentially no more antibiotics, you want as many antimicrobial tools around as possible. You might create your own silver plateware. That way you don't get some sort of bacterial infection if it can be prevented. Even if it's modern silverware is stainless steel. That could be melted down to make arrowheads. So it's a stupid decision, but it is a minor one. I mean, maybe this one could be a little forgivable. A better example might be The Road, which is a post-apocalyptic movie about a man and a boy pushing a shopping cart down a road. I hated this movie. I hated the book. But at least the father in that movie took anything he found that was practical. Number 3, the kid sets a fire when he wants to escape the island. So after the father and the son return to the island, the boy decides to hunt for his mother because he heard there is a doctor living on the mainland. In order to create a distraction to leave the island, he sets fire to a building to get the gate guards to leave their post. Now, yes, 12-year-old boys can be impulsive, but the resources on this island are very scarce, and this is the only home this boy has ever known. Would he really have set a fire and risked the lives of people in the village? People he's grown up with, people who clapped for him when he left for his rite of passage. In this case, the kid develops a stupid plan, and his mother, who has to have also known the same villagers and lived there even longer, just kind of goes along with it to save herself. You know, communism in small groups actually does work. And it's hard to believe a woman would save herself when she's been so dependent on the group for so many years. Now, for a good example of a plan executed correctly, even if it didn't work, is Die Hard. The film is about a cop who's at a Christmas party when terrorist attacks. Bruce Willis is trapped in a skyscraper. Terrorist attack, he hits the fire alarm, figuring the fire department would come along with the police. This is a great way of showing a smart character who can think on his feet. A better way of handling this in 28 years later might have been having the boy talk to villagers and convincing them to accompany him and his mother onto the mainland to find the doctor. Now you have no need for the father at all, but the whole village come together to save this woman's life. And if you need this to still be the story of the boy and his mother going on an adventure, then you can kill the escorts off with fast zombies. It's easy enough to do once they reach the mainland. Number 4, the shipwrecked sailors. Eventually, we meet a Swedish sailor named Eric and his small team of companions. We learn the island is under quarantine. The island of the entire United Kingdom is under quarantine. And we learn that once you set foot on the UK, you can never leave. This sailor then explains that his boat hit something and it sunk. Now, this kind of falls into a trap that writers who don't know much about the military or how joint operations work can kind of fall into when they're writing. If the entire island was under quarantine, there would be procedures for dealing with that sort of problem like a sinking boat. If the island had been under quarantine for 28 or so years, there would have been things like mechanical problems before where boats had to be towed, so they would have procedures in place. Now, in this case, the sailors have all their equipment. So I think it can be assumed that they were in some kind of lifeboat, right? They didn't have to swim to shore where they're kicking off gear just to stay afloat. So in this case, there is zero chance these sailors would have headed for land. They would have waited in the lifeboat until they were rescued. And there would be rescue procedures in place after almost 30 years of some sort of joint naval operation, joint naval quarantine operation. A movie that did this better was Event Horizon, which is a movie about a rescue ship inspecting a derelict spacecraft. In this case, Lawrence Fishburne decides that everything is far too weird, and he just says, "We're leaving."
It's done.
And that is what a sensible crew would do. Although in this case, the sensible crew would stay in the darn lifeboat. Forcing the crew to make a stupid decision so the movie can happen, it's just lazy writing. Now, a better way of doing this would have been for the soldiers to, let's say they're British. Perhaps British soldiers who fled the island, but whose families died, or perhaps they don't know the current status of their families. Their families could still be alive. Perhaps some British soldiers occasionally halo jump onto the island to scout the island and report back to the Joint Operations Command Center by radio. And they do it knowing it's a one-way trip, but it's worth it because they want to see what happened to their families, or they do it out of duty to the king, or because they want to see what happened to the island, or they're dying of cancer. There's so many ways they could have done this without having a team of sailors make a bad decision. Number 5, the sailors have no idea how to fight. Now, granted, these guys are... Now, I believe in Sweden, their Marine Corps kind of falls under their Navy, but it's never really specifically mentioned that these guys are Marines. But there's a scene where shipwrecked sailors run from the infected and they just get picked off one by one. Now, at the beginning of the movie, a title screen explains that Britain was overrun. The infected streamed into France, I assume through the channel, where the Europeans beat them back. Now, during this counterattack, military forces likely learned a heck of a lot about how to fight the infected. These lessons would have been passed down as TTPs, or tactics, techniques, and procedures. There is no doubt that a bunch of sailors would have learned these TTPs and learned to use them. And, you know, granted, we don't know whether these are Marines or not who would know small unit tactics, but if you're going to put a bunch of dudes with small arms on a boat with a remote chance that they might encounter the infected, you're going to teach them everything they need to know to survive. And if you want to show a desperate chase scene, I mean, fine, but show these guys fighting the proper way first, and then they get overrun and all sense kind of collapses and it's every man for himself. For a good example of this, check out the movie Aliens. This film takes place on a planet where some colonists disappear and colonial Marines are sent to investigate. The Marines get ambushed by the aliens. They sustain heavy losses, but they fall back with military discipline. It is a chaotic situation. And yes, granted, in the world of aliens, these Marines are battle-hardened, probably more battle-hardened than the crewmen of a small naval vessel, so it might be unfair to compare the two. But even unblooded sailors probably would have put up more of a fight than what you see. So this is yet another example of kind of like the selective stupidity that the writer turns on and off because they need to narrow this group of sailors down to one dude. Number 6, the mother helps a pregnant infected. Yeah, this really happened. So there's a scene where the group stumbles upon a pregnant woman and the mother just kind of walks up to the woman and helps her give birth. Now, I see what the writer was trying to do here. I think with the birth, he was trying to show the miracle that can happen, or maybe make an allegory about life around so much death or something. But again, this mother, the mother who was helping the other mother give birth, managed to survive on an island for at least 28 years. It is unclear whether she ever ventured off the island, but there is a part where she kills an infected with a plastic bag. So this woman has some skills. She knows how dangerous the infected are. But when the script needs her to be stupid so the movie can happen, she suddenly becomes stupid and then helps this infected mother give birth at risk to her own life. Now, this was better handled with the movie The Thing. In this movie, a bunch of workers in Antarctica, they may have been infected by this monster that can look like any one of them. So a character literally ties people down before running a blood test on himself and the other workers to see if they're infected by the monster. Compassion here is balanced with hard survival logic. Prove you're not a danger or you don't get freedom. If you really wanted to show the scene of giving birth, maybe the group comes upon the mother just as she's giving birth. Eric shoots the woman because he knows how dangerous the infected are, but the baby is halfway out of her and crying. So then they pull the baby the rest of the way out. And then you can have a whole scene where they argue whether the baby's infected or not. Number 7, Eric threatens rather than shoots. Now, during this birthing scene, Eric repeatedly threatens the mother that he's going to shoot. I think he starts a countdown. Like this guy has lost all of his Navy buddies to the infected. At this point, he's probably not going to take chances. He's not going to say, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to stop. No, he's just going to shoot. And a good way of showing this lack of hesitation for someone who suddenly realizes the threat their life is in the movie Departed. In this movie, Matt Damon is a cop, but he's a secret mole for a crime boss in the Boston Police Department. When he finds out there's another mole, he shoots that guy immediately to frame the dead man as the mole. So this probably could have been handled better by Eric just shooting that pregnant mother immediately. Number 8. The doctor tranquilizes Samson. After the birthing scene, Eric is killed by an alpha, or I guess like a leader infected. The boy shoots the leader full of arrows, but this dude is still coming. When the alpha is finally stopped by a morphine dart, they discover that they just found the doctor. The doctor just kind of comes upon them, which I am inclined to believe, the movie needs to happen, right? And after which the doctor says, we better get going before he wakes up. And this kind of implies that the doctor knows Samson is dangerous, but the doctor doesn't kill him. Now, later when we see the bone monument, which, you know what, I'm going to cover that. So this is going to be 9 instead of 8. Now, later when we see the bone monument, we realize that maybe he didn't kill him because the doctor thinks he's just there to witness or memorialize. Either way, you have someone who's obviously a smart guy. He's able to diagnose the mother's terminal cancer with no diagnostic equipment, and suddenly he becomes stupid and doesn't kill Samson because the movie needs to happen. Now, this guy knows that Samson is dangerous. So we have a guy who survived for 28 years on the mainland with infection all around him in what looks like an unprotected camp, and he still has sympathy, enough sympathy not to kill some of the infected when he gets a chance to do so easily. Like if he had tried to live this pacifist life, he would have been dead. He wouldn't have survived this long. And again, this happens because the writer needs Samson to come back at a later point, so the movie can happen. Now, a more realistic example of this is The Descent. This is a movie where a bunch of women are exploring a cave when they get set upon by cave-dwelling monsters, and they're killed off one by one. At one final point in the movie, a woman takes a climbing axe and hits another woman, I believe, in the knee with it to slow her down, so the monsters get the woman she just hit instead of her buying her time for her own escape. I can tell you this. You may think of yourself as a good person, but typically you don't know what you're going to do to survive until you actually have to come to that point. So, look, in order to keep if you absolutely had to keep Samson around, the doctor could say something like, oh, I need him alive to study the progression of the virus, or maybe use another fast zombie or another alpha in order to have your chaotic scene where the doctor is attacked. And now I'm going to talk about this, even though it's not a stupid, I guess it is a stupid decision, but it just bothered me so much, I'm just going to talk about it anyway. Number 9, the bone monument. It's later found that the doctor spends all of his time, essentially, burning the flesh off of infected and creating these massive monuments. And this is kind of where stupidity comes into play. A man with the skills of a doctor would have been highly valuable to any community that's left over on the mainland or even on the island. Not only as a physician, but a trainer who can teach the next generation of physicians. There is a psychological theory by, I think it's Abraham Maslow, that says humans are motivated to satisfy a 5-level hierarchy of needs. The bottom is physiological. You need food, shelter, water, air. Next up on the hierarchy of needs is security, followed by love, self-esteem, self-actualization. Art would kind of be at the very top of the pyramid, and the bone memorial is art. And one of the reasons the Chinook Indians in Seattle created such beautiful art is that they had the freaking time. The bays around Seattle were teeming with fish. You reach in, grab a freaking fish, you got your dinner. So they spent a heck of a lot less time finding food than, let's say, the prairie tribes who hunted buffalo when they were available. So in order to kind of create a sculpture like this bone sculpture, the doctor would have to somehow feed himself, plus somehow dodge all the infected, all while hunting and gathering for food and chopping wood for fuel to burn the skin off the bones to create a sculpture. Now, I don't know how many calories it would take to drag dead bodies to a fire pit, burn them, and use their bones to build a monument, plus chop all the wood to make this fire happen, but it's heavy labor. And it's more calories than he's probably likely to find while foraging. So logically, the doctor really would have, if he wanted to build a bone monument, it would have made more sense for him to show up at a village, offer his doctor services, and then maybe occasionally go out and collect building materials for his monument, collect the dead infected for his monument. But the doctor makes a stupid choice, living alone to build his monument. Now, you could say that, all right, nobody might want that dude around if he was building a bone monument in his spare time, but would they really? Look, if your town needed a doctor, how much would you say, yeah, he does build a bone monument, but we really need a doctor. So odds are any village would have been happy to have this dude, even though he was like, yeah, I want to build a bone monument. You know, okay, dude, what you do in your free time is up to you. So instead of hooking up with a village that could give him food so he could work on his art project in return for doctor services, the guy decides to make the stupid choice of living alone, essentially so that the mother and the son can kind of stumble upon the monument. Again, I know what the writer was doing. I think they were trying to allude to the skull monument in Rwanda, which shows victims of the Tutsi genocide. But this movie did it better. The Martian did it better. In this movie, you have an astronaut stranded on Mars, and only after his basic needs are met, food, water, does he go out and start compiling the experiments that his shipmates had underway before they evacuated the planet. So how could this have been made more effective? Well, honestly, what if there was a neighboring town that the island knew about but didn't train with because they have a freaking huge bone monument there? Like, is there anything else that would make you go like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't go over there, but a pile of freaking skulls, right? So, look, if I was like a raider, and you know they have raiders, if I was a raider, I would certainly avoid the town with the giant freaking bone statue. You know, that would be a pretty effective deterrent to prevent people from checking you out, especially if you're the only town with a doctor for miles. But maybe that could be the reason that people from the island never go there, and they hear a rumor of a doctor there, and that motivates the boy to go to the strange mainland town with the bone monument. Yeah, in a nutshell, the main problem with the movie 28 Years Later is that the people who engage in this selective stupidity would have been dead. They would have been dead a lot quicker. They would have been calories for the infected years before. And that really took me out of the movie. You know, I've written 3 books, and I actually think The Last Republic is better than 28 Years Later. At least it's logical. I mean, people in this book make some stupid decisions, like, hey, let's do an airstrike, you know. But the stupid decisions have actual consequences. They don't get a free pass on the stupid decisions they make in this book. And you know, one interesting thing, you can pick this up on Amazon or on Audible if you're a Marine. But you know, one kind of interesting thing is that one of the things I've learned as a writer is that I kind of owe you. If you're going to give me $18 for a paperback, $10 for the Kindle, or actually, I don't know how much money I make on Audible. They use credits. I don't freaking know. But, you know, someone's going to give me money and say, entertain me for 12 hours, 40 hours if you're a Marine, right? And I'm not the world's greatest writer, but I can tell you that I feel an obligation to give you the best possible product if you're going to give me your money and your time. So, you know, I'm not going to make a character suddenly stupid because I don't feel like developing a better manuscript. It's taking advantage of your audience. I can tell you this, dude, I'm living the dream. I get to entertain and inform people for a living. So when you hand me $18 to entertain you, I want to give you the best possible product I can. Because honestly, I am nothing without you. So thank you guys for watching. And, wow. We're actually at this. I think this is the first movie rant I've ever done. I think I analyzed that Civil War movie for accuracy, but I think this is the first time I've ever been mad at a movie and wanted to do a video. All right, thank you guys for watching. Buy a T-shirt from Bunker Branding. In the modern age of progress and preparedness, one thing separates the professional from the amateur: appearance. That's why forward-thinking Americans choose bunker branding apparel, the official uniform of those who get things done. Each shirt is precision engineered and field tested under rigorous conditions such as extended YouTube filming operations, Substack editorial duty, and the occasional internet argument, designed for comfort, durability, and undeniable sense of tactical cool. So remember, citizens, when you're defending democracy, refueling freedom, or simply mowing the strategic lawn, bunker branding keeps you mission ready, wrinkle-free, and unmistakably American.